Okay, so that's just since we're all familiar with these ideas and these teachings, that's the way we can motivate too. Uh, to just motivate in the way that to put your mind into a mindset that thinks that whatever happens in this hour and a half, of course, our whole life and our whole day, our whole life, our whole week, but just in this hour and a half we share together, that anything that happens doesn't matter what the data is, because the data is empty of being anything until we make it something. So no matter what comes at us, what we discuss, what imprints are made through our hearing, through our sight, through our thoughts, and taste through the Tibetan tea, it all is motivated. So all these are clothed or imbued with the scent of the awakening mind. It doesn't, it doesn't have to be anything special, nothing special. And now even for Bill taking the lay vows, if you take them with the bodhicitta motivation, then always they're generating every instant. Your vows constantly are generated every moment you keep them, so that you're creating the merit, as I understand it. Of course, these are hard things to see. Okay, so just think for a moment like that. This is the highest purpose. There's many, many traditions, Buddhist, non-Buddhist, but it's very, very, very fun. Even amongst the Buddhist traditions, even we don't find a lot. Sometimes the word bodhicitta is not even mentioned. So bodhicitta is not so much a romantic feeling, it's a state of mind, okay? And we can talk about it more later. So just if you haven't generated real bodhicitta, then you wish to generate it, and it will be generated. So that what we do now is for the full awakening, for the benefit of all living beings. Okay. Okay. So a couple things. First of all, any comments from the content from last week and any requests that we cover this week or the next couple weeks? Nothing? Okay.
Karma.
Karma?
Hmm.
Okay.
Please.
Okay, I'll try my level best. Yeah, so my intention here, as you know, probably my intention is being probably from the influence of Lama Yeshe on me. Of course, Lama Zopa Rinpoche too, but I had the great fortune to be with Lama Yeshe for about 9 years. And what struck me was that I believe that everything might be an exaggeration, but we could debate, that I think just about everything in the Dharma, everything we study, can be is related to the human mind. And so that's not a cultural thing. It's just not. And I have a goal. I'm going to do a program later this year. I hope if we can get set up, because when I first studied the Lam Rim, for example, I was struck by, I don't know if I was doing it right, but it just seemed universal to me. It didn't, I mean, of course, I love the tradition, the Tibetan in it, it seems very steeped in a lot of religion and, right? It almost can come out that way, being very religious, depending on how it's taught. But actually, no, if you reflect on it, so Lam Rim was created, or what do you want to say? Not created, it's not the right word, but constructed by Lama Tsongkhapa, right? So a historical Tibetan figure, many, many hundreds of years ago. So there are people that sort of write off the Lam Rim as being, well, that was for that culture. That was for that time. But then you could say the same thing about Shakyamuni Buddha, right? 2,600 years ago. Oh, it's not relevant. And there people are saying this, and I'm really going to put a big caution out. I don't think to you people. But I think it's very good to be cautious and not so naive anymore. Once you get into this, once you devote yourself, commit yourself to Buddhist approach, you have to start becoming a little discriminating, because there's so much noise out there. There's so much thing, and it all so much about being Buddhist, right? It's Buddhist this and Buddhist that. I think it may be Buddhist, but one has to be really clear on what is being art, what's being described, what's being taught. Don't just accept it because people are calling it that. Um, And then also to be clear, what is our motivation? Why are we studying these teachings? Why are we involved in this? So when we talked about this class as being integrating, something like integrating the Dharma in our daily lives, it's not so much that that's a big leap. That should be the foundation anyway. You see? But because so much about Dharma, especially in our tradition, I always say it's a bit academic often, so that it can be construed that what we're studying is somehow different than what we should be living. Okay? What we're studying should somehow, maybe it's not really integrated in our practice, and practice, when we talk about practice, meditation practice and our daily practice, I think that if that the purpose of daily practice is really, don't you think, the purpose of daily practice is not to be experienced on the cushion. The purpose of daily practice is rehearsal for when we go out there and we're working in our lives or with our families and and our friends, So that is, and so one of the, when we look at the fundamental path, the Hinayana path, it's very much about creating an environment where you practice, right? I mean, I'm generalizing, you got to forgive me for I do tend to generalize, but when we're looking at this, it's almost like um, when you look at the Mahayana teachings, and particularly some of the teachings of the Tibetan, not just Tibetan, but the Mahayana teachings, where we're talking about thought transformation, for example. When you look at Shantideva's seminal text, right? It's all about problems, again, generalizing, but it's about transforming problems, isn't it? But you don't find that in many other traditions, even in other Mahayana traditions. It sort of reverts, some of them revert back to it's all about sitting on your cushion. Okay? Have you found that? Do people find that that's some sort of a bias towards that? And that bias is infiltrating. We'll just talk about America because, oh no, sorry, Jay. Okay, we'll talk about America and Australia. That, or modern. We'll say that bias is weaving its way into modern Buddhism. So my caution is, well, I'm trying to caution everybody. I tend to, I have a sort of an agenda about this and a strong passion that, when we're all students in some way are connected with Lama Zopa Rinpoche, and when Lama Yeshe was the one who founded the FPMT. But when Lama Yeshe passed away, I think there were only 11 centers or something like that. So Rinpoche then continued, the growth and the evolution of the foundation for the preservation of Mahayana tradition. And sometimes people had a really hard time. I was one of them because he was so traditional, right? You may not know this, but Lama Yeshe style, if you haven't studied Lama Yeshe style, then you really need to really, sort of encourage you. Have everyone at least heard some of Lama Yeshe's talks or read his, everyone? Yeah. Okay. Bill? Okay. Jay?
Jay, it's Jay, and
Yeah.
absolutely, yeah,
Okay.
he's definitely my kind of guy.
Okay. So different flavor, right? And Lama Yeshe passed away and passed on the lineage to Lama Zopa to develop. Then Lama Zopa went kind of sort of traditional, but that's not really accurate because what Lama Zopa Rinpoche did is that he may have been the only one. I don't know every teacher, so it's not fair for me to say that. But FPMT is a big organization, and what he did is he felt, I believe, I'm sort of, you know, projecting here, but what I think he did is that he people wanted to start modernizing the teachings right away. And Lama Yeshe was kind of carried that flavor. He was really, really, really insistent upon uh, the us Westerners or us modern people practice modern and Western Buddhism. I remember a friend of mine who's been a monk for 50 years kept trying to learn Tibetan. And he was at Kopan for many years, and then he was in India. And every time, and then 3 times Lama Yeshe found him studying. He says, "What are you doing?" He says, I'm studying Tibetan. And he said, why? You're Australian. And I wanted to become a translator, and Lama told me not to. He said, when my students become translators, their practice degenerates, which I don't know if that's true these days. But because he really wanted us to get the essence, go to the essence of what Buddhism is. And Buddhism is universal, right? Like his project of universal education, it's universal. So I think that all these teachings, our job, maybe my job, part of my job or my mission I take on is to find the universality in these teachings. So when we start talking about water bowls, prostrations, statues, these very religious, even somewhat Tibetan forms of Buddhist practice, of Buddhism. I encourage people to understand that these are symbols that maybe were developed by a certain culture, and in and of themselves are not inherently existent, right? There's no inherently existent statue even of Manjushri, right? I don't know what Manjushri looks like. I mean, I imagine maybe it doesn't look exactly like that statue. I imagine it's much more even beautiful and fluid, and you know what I mean, and made of light too. So if he's made of light, it's hard to imagine. I think the easiest for me, one of the easier leaps into that is thinking about how rainbows exist or the northern lights, right? Yeah. But I always say I don't mean to imply that you are too, but if you're like me, we're very concrete, aren't we? We're very solid. And even we think in the Tibet, for example, the Tibetan, even we think not just Tibetan, but even we think about reincarnation, right? We might meet like a reincarnated Lama or something, and we think it's the same Lama as last time, or the same person. I might meet someone that they know their past life, right? But it's very different. It's not linear like that. It is the same general consciousness, yes. It's the same general consciousness, of course. My general consciousness that of last life, maybe I was a dog, that personality was a dog. This personality is a person. So they're not the same person. Generally, yes, of course, same consciousness, yes. But the personality has changed, hasn't it? So us Western people are so linear. And so even we meet, we might meet a lama that's an incarnate lama, and then we heard he was this lama and that lama, or she was this. But you have to be discriminating. It's a different personality. Okay. And we see that with many, many high lamas Pabonka Rinpoche, one of the highest lamas in the Gelug tradition, is not a figure this time around, or last time either. He reincarnated and then he died I think he's 21 or 22, and this is next one now. And he's nowhere to really be found. Okay. I don't know why I'm talking about that. Sometimes I get messed up. Okay, well, should we do a little screen sharing? Any thoughts, any comments you want to make?
I would just say that in kind of in agreement with you that in his book, Introduction to Tantra,
Yeah.
you made the specific thing about learning Tibet, and he says, sometimes people go on to say they're going to learn this language, but then they don't understand the language anyway, and so it'd be much better for them to really understand the meaning of the prayers. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter what language it's in.
Doesn't matter. And if you haven't had a chance, pick up Lam Yeshe's. You get it for free actually from the Lam Yeshe Wisdom Archive. His Silent Mind, Holy Mind. His whole interpretation of Christmas. Beautiful book. And I had the great fortune of actually being there for most of those talks, and very, very important along the topic that we're talking now. And so if you get a chance, Silent Mind, Holy Mind from Lama Yeshe Wisdom Archive. Okay, let's see if we can do this quicker than last time. Let's see if this works, you guys and gals. Is it there?
Yeah.
Now let's see if we can get the full screen then. Full screen?
Yeah.
Oh my God. What the heck, right? So if I'm on the wrong place. Okay. I don't know if there's much reason to review what we talked about last week. Let's start here and just share some ideas. Now, some people have been in my classes many times, and so if you see some duplication, forgive me, okay? And you can just call me out on it. The thing is what we really want to do is bring in our practice in everyday life. We want to have the right context, okay? So when we look at the unique quality of Buddhist thought, you know, I don't want to just be sort of political by saying that in general, I'm not sure that Buddhism is really a religion. I mean, it is a religion because people have made it a religion, right? Because people need, some certain cultures are more faith oriented, right? And so they can extract from the Buddhist thought, maybe those qualities that are maybe a little more faith generated, or maybe some people are more faith oriented. But when you really dig down and study the four philosophical schools, which is the foundation of Buddhist thought, the foundation of Buddhism, which the foundation of Buddhism really is understanding the nature of the mind, and then understand the nature of reality. It really comes down to that. That doesn't sound too religious to me. Okay, so there's no way to study. No, when I say no way, you can study Buddhism without studying the nature of the mind and without studying the nature of reality. But when you really, really look and study, right? I mean, anyone can pipe in here, but when you really look and study and get deeper into your practice, you are eventually, maybe quickly, you're going to start having to engage in understanding the nature of reality. There's no way you can attain liberation or enlightenment without that. No way. So then you start wondering, well, what's everybody doing who's not studying that? When I say study, I don't necessarily mean academically. I mean reflecting. We need some academic understanding, but the nature, reality, or shunyata, the emptiness of inherent existence, you can't practice tantra if you don't know that. So people are meditating. Honestly, I shouldn't say that. It may happen that we get involved in tantric meditations because we're drawn to meditation and we're drawn to that. We have some karma with that approach, but you can't really practice that if you don't understand what the emptiness of inherent existence is. You can't do any of those practices. You can maybe do some of the faith-based rituals in the beginning, the preparatory practices, but you can't engage in any of the four levels of tantra without understanding of emptiness. And I'm not saying insight in emptiness, but at least intellectual, right? There's no way. Now, I would even argue that that when you start looking at in the Mahayana and the Sutra teachings, the teachings on thought transformation, for example, exchange yourself with others and all those, 8 verses of thought transformation, all those. I don't, I think they're really, really amazing to teach to people, um, as sort of a psychology, and they really help. Like you could use them in counseling, helping couples, right? But that's the way they were really designed, I think, when the Kadampa Geshis and whoever and Tisha, when they even Shantideva, when they came up with these ideas, they were always in the context of emptiness. Okay? So to practice lojong or thought transformation, it is extremely powerful when you balance it with the view of emptiness. It's still powerful without that, but it doesn't really lead to any long-term solution. So a lot of people, including myself, might teach the 8 verses or teach thought transformation without going deeply into the teaching on emptiness. But since we're all students here, then I want to impress upon you that to impose, like if you were going to meditate or do practice on thought transformation, like a retreat or something like that, I would encourage anyone that let's say you're doing, I don't know how many sessions a day, 6 sessions a day, then I would say the first 15 minutes of every session, you should be meditating on emptiness. Then you go into the verses. Okay. And then you go into the verses or the thought transformation or the exchange yourself with others, whatever. In the Lam Rim, same thing. So Lam Rim, and when you get to the highest scope practices in the Lam Rim, it's so much of it is thought transformation, isn't it? Okay. So in those practices on thought transformation in Lam Rim, Lam Rim's funny because it'll teach, it's a graduated path. And so emptiness, in terms of if you follow a traditional graduate path, and you don't study emptiness till the end, but that's probably only a way of structuring the teaching. But in fact, if we're going to study anything from perfect human rebirth, from the lowest scope up to the highest scope, if it's balanced with a view of emptiness or reality, it's extremely powerful. Extremely powerful. When we meditate on perfect human rebirth, for example, and I saw that in my home. So when we meditate on perfect human rebirth, for example, have people done Lam Rim retreats? Everyone's done Lam Rim teachings, right? Yeah. So for example, just take this perfect human rebirth teaching that. It seems so. It's often taught as sort of a lower scope way of rejoicing and appreciating this life we've got, right? If you're meditating in a balanced way, and everyone here I think is advanced enough to start realizing that when you look at the teachings on the perfect human rebirth, when we look at method and wisdom, okay, and you look at all those perfect human rebirth, death and dying, exchange yourself with others, those are all the method. That's method, right? So what we tend to do is we divorce ourselves. We go, okay, and I'm going to meditate on the perfect human rebirth. Oh, next session, I'm going to meditate on emptiness. But actually what it should be is meditating on perfect human rebirth, right? Meditating on the perfect human rebirth, any of the death and dying, it enhances your realization and experience of emptiness. So the perfect human rebirth that you might have, when I say you, I'm just general you, right? Us. With the perfect human rebirth, you might be meditating for, half hour, 45 minutes on the perfect, going through the list and all those kinds of things. But what is actually, so that's fine and that's good. When you're balanced, when you take your understanding of the view of reality and then meditating on the perfect human rebirth balance in sort of because when you're doing, sort of mindfulness meditation on perfect human rebirth, part of your mind is also holding the view of emptiness. Then what happens is your view of emptiness starts to explode, as Lama Yeshe would say. Okay. So what happens you can have a realization of perfect human rebirth. So you can have you can have a realization of perfect human rebirth, have a realization of death and dying, have a realization of change yourself with others, have a realization of compassion, have realizations of the parami, all those Lam Rim topics. They're not just there as intellectual meditations. When a person starts developing insight into emptiness, and in the beginning, the insight is conceptual, but it's not what we mean by conceptual typically. I mean, not, it's not typically it's not intellectual. It's conceptual, meaning you get a conceptual image of emptiness. And you might only be able to hold that for a few seconds. When that conceptual insight into emptiness, and of course, in the future, or later down the road, the direct perception emptiness is balanced, then, the yogi, the meditator, doesn't stop when he or she realizes non-conceptual view of emptiness, doesn't stop meditating on the Lam Rim. They meditate more on it. Because what happens is, when we look at the perfect human rebirth and what is 8 riches, 10 endowments, or 8 endowments, 10 riches, and so I get them mixed up. What happens is that you're going through the list for year after year or month after whatever you're doing, and then all of a sudden when you start getting some flavor of the view of emptiness, then that list sort of dissolves. What you find is all those pointers are guides and pointers, but they're not the thing. I think I said last week, Krishnamurti said that the sign is not the destination. So all the outlines we're doing in our meditations are not the destination. They're not the thing. Okay. With the insight into reality and perfect human rebirth, any other Lam topic, any Buddhist topic, any Dharma topic, you see, then you have insight in what actually is a precious human rebirth. You actually have and you go, wow, that's it. And there's a sort of like explosion again in your heart because it's mind blowing. And the only thing that kind of comes up is like, oh, like I'm human. Wow, I'm human. This is what humanness is. This is what death and dying is. This is what death is. So death is not this macabre, morbid thing. Okay? It's a deeper insight into reality. So it's good we meditate on death. But the way we meditate on death is not what death really is. Okay? Jessica, do you have Tibetan tea? No. Okay. I was talking about Tibetan tea before you came on. Because I have some Tibetan. Okay. So does that make sense? Or am I just going off on a rave here? Is it making sense? Or no, have I lost you? Sense? Michael says sense. Bill says sense. Jessica says sense. Denise says sense. Jayla says sense. Oh, good. Anyone else missing? No,
Yeah, I've got a question. I have a question.
Jay, yeah.
Yeah. And my question is, you said to basically precede every Lam Rim meditation with 15 minutes of an emptiness contemplation. Did I understand that correctly?
What I was suggesting is when we're doing formal practice on Lam Rim meditation, not necessarily the study of it, right? Doing formal, I would say that you should ground your meditation first in the view of emptiness. Yes.
And can you, and I know this is like a whole nother series of classes, but can you tell me what sort of a quickie emptiness contemplation would be?
Yeah, how do we do this? I want to go off screen. Oh, here we go. Okay. You want the Reader's Digest version?
Yes, sir. That sounds great for me. Yes.
Okay, so there's many, 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 many ways to do that. And the reason there's so many ways is because this topic, of course, is the deepest topic we have. And there are many different ways to approach it. So what I would, okay. The first, okay, I'll give you a short explanation because it's not, I don't want to kind of butcher it. So, because then there's some danger that people might, we might make a mistake in how we approach it. So when we start thinking about emptiness and meditating on emptiness and incorporating it into our meditation and into our lives, it's essential to know, well, what is empty of what? Okay, so emptiness is not a thing really. Okay, which is why it's best to say emptiness of inherent existence, emptiness of independent existence, empty of concrete existence. So everything that we see now, we see in a way incorrectly.
Yep.
Emptiness is merely seeing things correctly. But why? How? So when you sit down, the first thing that can help is a prompt or a trigger is to know that even everything you're looking at, experiencing, thinking about, hearing, smelling, tasting is seen incorrectly. What's the incorrect thing that we're seeing is we're seeing it as concrete, as if it's existing separate from the subject. So it's me and the thought, or me and my fear, or me and the meditation, or me and my breath, right? That's how we go through every instant of our lives since beginning this time. Nothing exists that way, though. That's what's so weird. Beginning of this time, we've been doing that. And nothing exists concretely, inherently, independently of us. Okay? Jay, are you following me?
Yes, I am,
Okay.
definitely.
So nothing exists independently. Yet, so the best thing to do, what you need to do, what one needs to do for many, many months sometimes, is just see that you're seeing it wrongly.
Yep.
That's the first step. And that's actually is the first step in the meditation on emptiness, what they call identifying the object. So spend time going, wow, okay, I see what Karuna meant. I am seeing that as separate, independent from me. And you can use any object. If you close your eyes and start meditating, you can use thoughts, or you're thinking of, your friend, or you're thinking of, dinner, or whatever your mind wanders to, or it's the breath. Even if you're doing the breath meditation, whatever, to settle the mind or the body, you can do it with the body too. And you look at yourself sitting there. Then when you see yourself sitting there and you're back against, you feel your bottom on the cushion or back against the chair, that is all seen as independently existing. And it doesn't exist that way. Okay. So then you could say, well, how does it exist? And I'll just give you this. So there's the quickie, right? Is it exists dependently. And what is very powerful, you might get a very deep insight, is when you can see the dependency is between the subject and the object. The object can exist without the subject, but not more importantly, but sometimes more profoundly, the subject cannot exist without the object. Right now, you and I can't exist without each other in this moment, because I'm teaching and you're listening, right? So probably I have a solid sense of teaching, and you have a solid sense of listening, or right? So that solid sense of you, I am here listening, whatever word, whatever description you'd come up with, is false. But we do that every instance since beginningless time, because that falseness is mere, and this is what you meditate on. So meditate for a while on how you and I, we see things independently existing.
Yep.
And it's a prison. And what happens for some people is you begin to really see it. And you go on and you see it and you see it and you go month after month and then month, and finally after month, go, okay, I get it. But it doesn't mean then you just see the dependent nature of it. So when we say it's existing independently, when you see reality, when you see it through emptiness, you see it as dependently, okay, or interdependently.
Mhm.
Okay. And that goes into deeper and deeper and deeper, explanations, which I won't go into here, but there's many ways things appear, that they are interdependent or dependent. Many ways, right?
Yep.
In fact, and you can tell me to shut up. So you shouldn't have asked me this. People who know me, I just go off, right? But there are three ways that things exist dependently. So you can use this. Maybe write this down. So one way is things are dependent on parts.
Yep. Yep.
So when I'm sitting here talking, I appear to not have any parts. I'm a monolithic identity, right? Like a solid, like this kind of single thing. So nothing is single. Everything has parts. Even space has parts. So that's number one, that things are dependent. The other way they're dependent is they're dependent on causes and cause and effect,
Yep.
cause and conditions. So everything that's impermanent is dependent on a cause. And most things are impermanent. Emptiness is permanent, space is permanent, okay? But most things are impermanent. Okay, so those are one and two. Then the third way that things are dependent, and you don't find this in all the philosophical schools, or they explain it differently, is things are dependently based upon the mind's labeling of the object. So there's a mental
Yeah.
dependency, mental dependency.
Okay.
Okay, so now
That
just,
last one,
yeah,
please.
yeah.
Please, Karuna.
yes.
Can you say that last one again?
Yeah, the third one is dependent upon mental labeling, yeah, or mental imputation. So I often have a debate with my wife. When we go for a walk, this one area, we go for a walk. And when we're coming back, we walk through this field, and then the field turns into a trail, and the field is behind us. So I always say to her, okay, is the grass in the field still there? Right? It's the old, and when a tree falls in the forest and no one is there, does the tree fall, or whatever the koan is.
That's a well-known quote from Bishop Berkeley, a philosopher, by the way.
Oh, is it really?
Yes, sir.
It's
Yeah.
not a Zen thing.
Not well, I know it from philosophy class, and it was definitely Bishop Berkeley.
And is he a current?
Sorry?
Is he current?
No,
Or is
no,
it?
no, no, no. He would have been about Berkeley, 1600s probably.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Maybe I always thought it was a Zen
Well,
poem.
look, from my experience, from what I've read, you know, different people, different cultures have come up with similar things.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right. So,
So,
yeah, that's right. So, so a lot of the lower schools, philosophical schools, don't have the mental imputation when they say it's emptiness, empty of existing independently and empty of existing singly or without parts, and empty of cause and cause and conditions, right? So cause and effect. So impermanence, everything that's impermanent has cause and effect. And like right now, so we don't right now, at least for me, I don't see cause and effect happening. Do you? I mean, I can intellectualize and say, yes, it must be happening. Do you see impermanence, by the way? Well, maybe if you saw it, you wouldn't tell me because you'd have really deeper insight. So, uh, but generally, I mean, meditating, yes, meditating, we do have, people have the experience of meditation and meditating and experience impermanence, gross and subtle impermanence. And then coming out of that meditation, they will experience the external world as being impermanent because there is nothing in our field of sight right now or sound that is not moving, is there? But we don't see it. You know, we don't see it. So I can see Denise, nodding her head. Okay, oh, I see him. That's not impermanence. That's gross impermanence. The subtle impermanence, all the atoms that are moving amongst my computer and everywhere else, and when we develop a deeper experience of in our meditation experience, we will see impermanence. We'll visually see it. I don't know. I hope that was helpful, Jay.
yes. Now, one follow-up question, and I apologize for this, but I'm thinking that can be this endeavor for me. I think this is what I'll do. Um, Rather than go through this whole mental process, I'll probably read bits of the Heart Sutra
Yeah.
because to me that I don't exactly understand it intellectually, but on some sort of intuitive level, I kind of go, oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I would really, I probably would have been a good thing for me to suggest that you read some verse or something like the Heart Sutra first, and then you get a feeling, right? I mean, we have to be where we're at, and everyone has some feeling for these things, everyone has some feel. So we go with the feeling that we have, and just that you sort of imbue your meditation session with that. That's why I would say if you have a feeling, or for our level, a feeling of emptiness, from meditating, then you just start with that, spend 3 or 4 minutes, really getting the mind into a state of wisdom, we could say, whatever level we're at, and definitely read it. That's why they do read the Heart Sutra first before many teachings, right? So yes, thank you. That's a good suggestion. And I see one chat. The objects of the senses exist only when they are perceived. The trees, therefore, are in the garden, no longer than while there is somebody by to perceive them. The trees discern the principle of human. Yeah. Yeah.
So I was
So
essentially for him, but yeah.
the object, so then we can have a debate, and I'm not going to go into the probably because it's just going to take us way off. But does that mean that so let me see that. Let me just see that chat again. The objects of senses exist only when they are perceived. That's correct. The trees, therefore, are in the garden no longer than while there is somebody by to perceive them. I don't quite get the wording on that. Sorry. Let's not worry about it.
They're
But
no longer there while there is somebody.
oh, they're no longer there. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So if that's true, then when you put a kettle of water on your stove and you leave the room, how is it the kettle of water is boiling when you get back if it doesn't exist when you leave?
And it's a different kettle of water when you get back.
But how come it's not just how is it still there? Why isn't it frozen? For when you came back, why doesn't?
Yeah.
If no one's perceiving it when you leave the room, how does it, when you come back, it's at a more advanced stage of boiling?
He certainly had his critics.
No, I'm on his side, but we have to look at these things and we have to debate these things. So when, yeah, so if something doesn't exist when you leave, does it not exist when you leave the room because it's dependent upon mental imputation?
And what would the Buddhist answer to that be? Because that is an interesting question.
Yeah. I
Is
can't,
it
I
where,
can't give the answers. I can't, it's not fair to just give all the answers.
Oh,
Karuna?
okay.
Yeah.
Is it the where?
Say it again.
Is it the where it exists?
So when you put your kettle of water on, you put it on the stove and you go out for a few minutes and you come back and it's boiling as if it's always been there, right? Right? I mean, you don't think, oh, it disappeared. You think, oh, we don't think of it at all. We just come back in the room.
Well, it was there, and then we left, and we came back, and it's in a different state. Would be something that's fair to say about everything.
Yeah, because of impermanence, right?
Yes.
But if its existence is dependent upon mental imputation and you're not there imputing, when you come back in, then did it really boil, or you just have a new imputation of a boiled water, of a boiling pot?
Can we carry an existence of it in our mind when we leave?
Well, there's an imprint, isn't there? When you're in the kitchen and you're looking at it, you fill it with water and put it on, and you leave, there's an imprint, right?
Yeah.
What makes it boil? Is it in your mind then? The pot is in your mind?
What makes it boil is the question.
Or what makes it even there when you come back?
What I impute onto it.
Okay, and so now you have a new imputation. Is that the same pot or a different pot?
Different.
It's different. That's interesting. So it's a different pot. So you have a lot of pots.
It's a different,
Every time you, so if you turn your back on it and turn back again, that's a different pot?
a different state of pot.
Oh, a different state of pot. You didn't say that. So what happens to the pot when you leave the room?
The same thing that happens to the tree that falls in the woods that I'm not there to see.
Did it fall or not?
To me, it didn't fall when I wasn't there.
Yeah, but did it fall? Just, I know it didn't fall when you were there, but did the tree fall? How did it fall if there's no one perceiving it, imputing it?
Right.
If the Buddhists are right, the Madhyamika, this is the highest school of Buddhism, saying that it's merely imputed. How did it fall if you weren't there to impute it?
Isn't this about the difference between inherent and non-inherent existence?
It's very related, yes. But yeah. So that tree, if it inherently existed, it would never fall, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
So it's not inherently existent, so it can fall, obviously.
dependent on causes and effects.
Yes.
Causes.
But that's the second level of dependency. Third
Okay.
level, the deepest level, is dependent upon a mind to compute it. I mean, okay. So the short answer is,
So is ABC levels then, not just ways?
what do you mean? Sorry.
First, when we understand
That's
dependent,
it's the most, yeah, that's the most sort of simple, concrete level. Yes.
okay.
Yeah. The lower schools do not articulate about this third dependency, mental imputation.
Got it.
But I have a question for you guys. Aren't there insects in the tree?
Potentially.
Aren't there devas and other beings and spirits around?
Yeah.
Ah, so there are minds imputing it, right? Ah, okay. Maybe that has something to do with it. What do you think?
I
Okay.
like
Maybe that has something to do with it. God, we've gotten under one slide. You guys are very, very tricky. Very tricky. I know.
Slow learners.
What's that?
Slow learners.
I'm a slow teacher, probably. Okay. So, okay, and I want to make a point here why this one slide I've had up for the whole time. Well, let's see. Hang on. I got a point here. Maybe it was in the other class. Yeah. There. So us Buddhists, actually, many times we don't like the Buddhist truths. Because if you're going to become Buddhist, you're either going to, I mean, Buddhist, once you open the door, you can't shut it again. You can't unknow this stuff. You can't unring this bell. And when you start talking about Buddhist thought and Buddhist philosophy, and it looks at like uh, Nangpa, meaning an inner being, it means one begins to appreciate, yes, not everything is internal, by the way. That would be a Chittamatra point of view. Everything is mind. Okay, that's the Zen is a Mahayana school. Their philosophical foundation is a Chittamatran, which is very profound, extremely profound. Everything is the nature of mind. Okay. Again, Madhyamika is so deep. That's the highest school of philosophy. It takes a lot of study, and you never, like, until you realize that you don't really even then you go back and read and read and read and study and study. And how does that work? How does this work? So, uh, but the bad part here for us regular people is that when a problem arises, you can't stop knowing, you can't unknow that there's a mind, our mind, involved here. So when you're dealing with, when you're dealing with an irate, angry customer, say, your non-Buddhist friends will tell you to do this and to do that, right? But the problem for us is there's this nagging little thing, this nagging little voice, and it gets louder and louder the longer we do these practices that says, something there's something in this annoying person that doesn't exist there. There's something in this annoying person that exists internally for me, in me, right? Now, if that person totally existed in you, that would be the Chittamatrin approach to explanation of reality. Everything is in the nature of mind. And it's very profound. And by the way, it's very hard to get past that. When we meditate and meditate on empty, on reality, and just meditate on mindfulness, one becomes to see more and more and more and more how everything is in the nature of mind, and everything is happening internally. When you're doing, for example, just not basic, but when mindfulness meditation is taught, these days, where you watch your thoughts and you watch the senses and the phenomena of experience, you begin to have the experience, I think, right, Denise, that you'll see, you know, sounds and things that are disturbing. You're doing your session, and all of a sudden, the noise from the next door neighbor with his leaf blower is something that you begin to go, wow, actually, there's no part of that sound that I can find that it's not inside my mind. Have you, am I hallucinating? Has anyone had that experience? Yeah. Yeah, right. I mean, we should have that experience, in early stages of our meditation. If we're really, all of us I think, are pretty committed. And when you really commit and you really do start doing mindfulness meditation, so the leaf blower, I mean, maybe it's easier. It's easier, of course, when it's not a leaf blower, but maybe a car passing off in the distance, right? I think I mentioned last week, Lam Yeshi said the one way he can never meditate if there's a mosquito buzzing around in his ear. It's like, that was the one thing. I can't do it then. Well, I don't believe him, by the way. Did I tell you about I heard a story. I like stories. I heard the story of Lama Zopa Rinpoche this week from his attendant. Should I tell you? Of course I will, but I just want to have permission. So, for most like Lama Zopa Rinpoche, I know for a fact he never laid down.
You told us the mosquito one last week.
Oh, forget it then. I told you the mosquito one. Okay. So the thing is that no, it's good thank you, because I don't have to waste your time. But the mosquito one too. Now think about it. Someone asked me, I told them the story the other day, and they asked me, oh, did he itch? I said, I never asked that part of it. I couldn't get to the part where they're just all over him, biting him, right? I was thinking about, but for now, so for Lama Zopa, and it's really important to remember that we can be just like that in this life, even in this life. That's just what Rinpoche was demonstrating, was just a meditative quality. It's something that happens once you develop single point concentration and calm abiding. That's not anywhere near enlightenment. Even in the Hindu tradition, they develop calm abiding. And maybe in other traditions, maybe in the Christian tradition too. And in the Islamic tradition, I don't know. So once one develops single point concentration or calm abiding, they're not the same, but they're close. Once you develop that, then meditating on then you can get to the point where meditating on the nature, and the mind will become completely silent. So the leaf blower becomes completely silent. There is complete silence. Okay. Now, one way that that becomes silent is when the leaf blower, the leaf blower, the noise, Jay, this goes back to what you were asking earlier. So the leaf blower, why it's irritating is that it's seen as something external to us. So that's that first one, right? As existing independently. The second one, cause and effect. When with the leaf blower, we are not seeing the process of cause and effects. We don't see it impermanence. It seems really solid, doesn't it? Yeah. Sometimes with really beautiful music, gentle music, you can see the difference. It's easier to see the impermanence of that, right? And then with a leaf blower, it's harder. Why? Why is that harder? Now, let me add to that. So the irritating customer or client is harder to see them as existing within one's mind than the person who's soft and gentle with you, not with attachment, but who's sort of just very unimposing, right? Doesn't move your mind. Attached people who come with attachment move your mind too, also too much. I mean, it's our attachment, but so why is that? So there is a difference. Now, is there a difference? What's the difference between the leaf blower and the gentle music? Or, the sound of the waves, Why with one we can see it's easier to see the more impermanent quality of it. Why is that? You have to answer, by the way. Not everyone has to answer, but someone has to.
Conditioning.
Huh?
Conditioning.
Conditioning. Right. Conditioned by what?
Society.
So society made us.
That's a bad answer, but
Yeah, it was. It's pretty
that's what
bad, but it's
I think because one is nice and soothing, and I'm willing to accept that as part of my mind, and the
right.
other is irritating, and I don't want to believe that irritation came from me. That clearly had to come from someplace else.
Yeah. Yeah. So now let's go deeper. What makes the first one soothing and the second one not? And yes, conditioning is all part of the, society. All these are conditions, but why, Michael, one is soothing and you want to hear it, and the other one is irritating and you don't want to hear it, or you have more reaction?
I would say because I like one and it brings me happiness, and
Right.
the other is, and I know I don't like to think of happiness as samsaric, right?
Mhm.
But it is really, right? And the other is irritating and makes me suffer. And so one I'm trying to avoid internally, and the other one I'm willing to accept internally.
Okay, so why do some people really love
Rap,
hard
acid
rock,
rock.
hard, hard rock, or yeah, and then we might listen to it and find it like the leaf blower, right? Heavy metal to me might sound like the leaf, sound like a factory or something, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And why? But what for other people it doesn't sound like that? Why?
I don't think the same things bring each of us happiness.
Okay, let's use the word pleasure.
I don't think
Mhm.
the same bring each of us pleasure.
Yeah, because we as confused people, we identify pleasure as happiness. That's our basic problem. And now, doesn't mean not to have pleasure, by the way. Lama Yeshe, for example, was very, very clear about that. He used to scold us saying, "You don't know how to enjoy. You people live in the West. Why are you coming to Nepal?" He says, "We have, really low quality things here. You have beautiful tea, a beautiful forest. It's not polluted. Why do you come here?" He said, "Nepali people and Tibetans would die to go to the West." So he said, you need to learn how to enjoy things. And he really demonstrated that. He really would show and really enjoy. But I will tell you something, it's hard to say. But Lama Yeshe, he just said, you need to enjoy, just don't cling.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is we just cling. We're habituated to cling. And the same exact thing happens with bad noises. The leaf blower, the heavy metal. Okay? Exactly the same thing, but it's the opposite direction. We don't cling to it, we cling to its opposite. So the more we cling to soft, gentle music, right? Cling, the more we are averted or have aversion to the heavy metal. Okay? It's all has to do with pleasure and our clinging to it. If we don't cling to the pleasure of sweet sounds, right? Praise, the 8 worldly dharmas or 8 mundane concerns. If we don't cling to sweet sounds, if we don't cling to praise, if we don't cling to pleasure, and we don't cling to reputation, fame, notoriety, then we don't cling to those, then negative sound, unpleasant sounds are not going to be so bad. The level of clinging to sweet sounds and pleasant sounds is probably the level to which you have an aversion to unpleasant sounds. The level of attachment or clinging or attraction to praise and compliments probably makes criticism that much more difficult. So we have an aversion to criticism and an attraction to praise and compliments. We have an aversion to aversion to unpleasantness and a clinging to pleasant sound. Okay, those 8 worldly dharmas work like that. They're just worldly concerns: pleasure and pain, praise and blame, loss and gain, notoriety, fame, bad reputation, and fame. That's one way to understand them. So it's interesting because if the more we're attached to our status, for example, like fame or status, as a as a professor or as a teacher, right? The more we have an aversion to being criticized for not meeting that status. Because we cling, like, that's my identity. Okay, my identity is I'm a professor, I'm a teacher. Okay. So if we really, you see this, so amazing. It's really very sad because in our culture, this American culture anyway, that the idea status of one's career is really, really, really pretty much shoved down our throats from when we're very young. And the more we buy into it, then the harder it is when we don't receive the recognition for that, right? Does this resonate for anybody? Or I don't know. Yeah? Okay. And we set ourselves up. We set ourselves up. And then we say something like, I don't know. We blame. So, okay, let's go back to this thing. There's one slide, not one slide. So jumped up to this. So the problem, so when becoming a spiritual person means we begin to view problems from an internal locus. Not that and then we start, it's not that you blame ourselves. That's the extreme, right? And this is where we have to understand the nature of the self, right? The nature of the I, the nature of the ego, the nature of, the personality. So I'm sorry, because we can get stuck when we go to the extreme of everything's internal. then we go into self-blame a lot. And it's hard not to, because you see, all these critical qualities that pop up in our reaction to attachment and aversion, clinging and pleasure to pleasure. Okay. So the mind is this. Oh, no, sorry, wrong place. So I always have these two quotes. Everything has mind in the lead, has mind in the forefront, is made by mind. Wow. So those grumpy clients of yours, Denise, everything has mind in the lead, has mind in the forefront, is made by mind. If one speaks or acts with a corrupt mind, misery will follow, as the wheel of a cart follows the foot of the ox. Okay? Now, this quote has a second part, and it goes, everything has mind in the lead, has mind in the forefront, is made by mind. If one speaks or acts with a virtuous mind, happiness will follow, as the wheel of a cart follows the foot of the ox. We don't think like that. We think the reason this rude client or customer or relative is talking to us like this because he's really rude. He's really rude. But the person exists there. Don't get me wrong. There's a person there somewhere. But everything coming out of his mouth is empty of having any substantial existence. It's not rude and it's not pleasant. It's neither. It's just data. It's just atoms and molecules. But we immediately interpret it based upon this internal thing. That's where we talk about being a Nangpa. Okay, so this guy is not really, really cheap and trying to cheat me out of this sale or this whatever. He's not really cheap. He or she is just data. It's just doing this thing. And yes, they might be trying to cheat you, but your attitude or my attitude, our attitude, where we get hurt by him or angry at him, right? All of that's the internal part. You cannot say, sorry to keep saying you, we cannot say that person is really bad. Can't say it. Yes, the person is expressing this data, but that data doesn't stay in that person very long, because it's about almost instantaneously it's entering our consciousness and our being. Of course, the human mind has both positive and negative sides, but the negative is transient, very temporary. Your up and down emotions are like clouds in the sky. Beyond them, the real, basic human nature is clear and pure. This is our potential. Okay? This is our potential. Lama Yeshe immediately goes to Mahamudra. He goes to the highest level of teaching, and he talks about connecting and remembering. Remembering. It's so frustrating that our real nature is pure and basic. Because why? Because the mind is clear. It's beginningless. It's formless. Okay? It just cognizes things. So we have to get back in touch with our purity. All that other stuff, all of our traumas, all of our pain, all of our wishes are all in the forefront. The background is the clarity of mind. When we become, through mindfulness meditation and meditation on the mind itself, then all these things pass through like clouds in the sky. Yes, there are stormy clouds. There are hurricanes. There are tornadoes. Yes. But the effect is different when it's just moving through the mind. One of my nephews from Australia was visiting last week, during the storms. He's actually from Melbourne, which, as Jay knows, is kind of a Portland, Oregon type of a place. And during these storms, he was here with his wife, and they were they'd never been to America before. They're so excited, and they wanted to go walk over at Land of Medicine Buddha because they really wanted to see redwood trees. Where can we see redwood trees? We got to see a redwood tree. So they went out in this storm, and they walked over there for couple hours. And they came back. And how was it? I said, how was it? Pretty wet out there. Oh, it was fantastic. Right? I went over, if I was with them, I'd be like Mr. Complaining and grumpy and right? It's the same stormy weather. Someone comes and complains to you, yells at you, some guy who's grumpy, and then he's someone's husband who loves him, maybe sees him as grumpy sometimes. His children see him as a kind of a hero if they're little kids. Okay, I think you know all this. So our big problem is blame. That's sort of the nature. That's the problem of samsara. Is it starts with a problem. So something, an occurrence, maybe not a problem, but an event. And maybe in our lives, we have lots of events. Some of us in our lives, we're living out in the woods, maybe, or in a quiet place, and maybe less events for us. But the events are always there. Even if you're living in a peaceful place, ants will invade your house. The roof will leak. Neighbors might be noisy. People come up the road. Disasters happen. It's not going to end. So it starts with whatever you want to label as a problem. Okay. And I have a question for you. I want to ask, hang on a second. I asked this last time, I think. But I didn't get an answer last time. And I want to know what the definition of a problem is before we go forward. Anyone want to try?
Something our mind perceives to be a problem, to be an obstacle, to be an obstacle in our way to reaching happiness.
Okay. Something that gets in the way. Can I rephrase and say, are you saying something that gets in the way of our happiness?
Obstacle, yeah, yes.
Okay.
Something.
Tell me a problem that you face today. It doesn't have to be too personal. I'm not meaning to put you on the spot. But let's just see if we can deconstruct this a little bit.
Let's see. Today wasn't very bad. Let's see.
Okay, yesterday.
Okay, I'm gonna just make something up. Today, my dog Tashi was being difficult and would not recall, and he wanted to run around and sniff all the smells and pee on everything.
Right.
And so that was a problem today.
And you got kind of agitated?
As much as I try not to, yes.
Okay, so let's just go slow. What makes that a problem, him doing that?
Usually, if I'm leaning towards agitation, it's because I'm in a hurry.
Okay, so the problem is agitation or Tashi?
Is my lack of time management.
Well, I see. So as long as you time manage your whole life, you won't have a problem.
Never have a problem. Everything's going to just run perfectly.
So I'm sorry to pick on you, but is it possible to time manage everything?
No, it's not possible.
No. So that's a concept, isn't it?
Something that I'm learning.
Yeah, it's a concept. So you deconstruct. Sorry, go ahead.
If I don't give myself enough time to ensure that Tashi gets outside he, goes to the bathroom and he does not need, well, actually, he's a dog. He wants to do a little run around and check the spots before we go into the office because he comes to work.
Okay, so it's a really good example of how this works. So we would say that Tashi's the problem. I'm going to generalize, just speak in broad terms. So Tashi was really a problem today, like that. That's how we tend to think. The traffic was really a problem today. But that's not what we're looking at, right? As we become more committed to a spiritual lifestyle. And why a spiritual lifestyle is because the goal is to become happier and happier. It's not like some religious thing, we got to do it. It's not some demand, although a lot of us enter it that way, like demand to be religious, demand we've got to be good, like sinning or we're sinners or something. We got to let go of that. We got to let go of that. It's about being happy. So the first thing in that deconstructing that problem is and I say you, I don't mean to lecture, so I will do that sometimes, and I apologize. But you have to shift your focus from Tashi being the problem to what is really the problem. And as we become committed to this spiritual path, then we commit to happiness. So you're not committed to happiness yet on that level. Maybe on that level. So now you have to commit to being happy when how do we figure this out? Tashi's being a little brat, wanting to smell everything, and I got to get back to work, or I got to get to work, whatever it is, time management. You see? So, that's not the answer. The answer to so when you're walking Tashi, you are now a purely deep Buddhist practitioner, and you're thinking only the goal is to be happy. And then ideally, the goal to be happy so you can benefit others. So now all of a sudden Tashi's doing what he's doing, and you're shifting the blame from Tashi, which is what we all do, to the agitated mind. The mind that set you up because it's attached to time management, or the mind that set you up because you're attached to not wanting to really be outside for that long, and Tashi's insisting really wanting to have more fun, smelling pee. Sounds kind of weird, doesn't it? Do you understand that shift? So for Lama Zopa Rinpoche, he was so deep into that the mosquitoes biting him weren't the problem anymore. Right? The problem was his mind, and he was conquering it, and he did conquer it. I mean, long before. He had done that before. He wasn't. And by the time he was getting eaten by 300 mosquitoes, he wasn't probably using that as his practice. He was giving his blood away, he said. He was making generosity. He was practicing generosity, giving his body away. You hear that of high bodhisattvas give their body away. Okay. So now, yeah. So we can do that with any of these things we face. And it might look like some of us have more problems. It's true. Conditions are different for everybody. It is true. Conditions are. I mean, I don't have the same problems as the people in Syria. I'm glad I'm not in Syria. I'd have to practice at a level that I don't, probably, maybe I can't, but I'd still have to, because the goal is happiness, right? So if someone in Syria says to me, and they're a Buddhist, I'd say, well, your goal is happiness. We have to figure out a way for you to be happy in Syria. And I know it sounds maybe a bit, does that sound too insensitive?
No.
Because I mean, there's a lot of suffering out there. Amongst ourselves. It's hard. It's super, 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 super hard. And we do have to manipulate conditions till we're at the level of Lama Zopa, where he took the mosquito net off of himself. Okay, we keep putting mosquito nets on, and we keep thinking mosquito nets are the answer to our happiness. And definitely I would be sleeping under a mosquito net. I'm using it as a metaphor. At some level on this trajectory, you give up the mosquito net. You don't need it for happiness. Yes, Denise?
Can I share a quick story?
Yeah. We got
So
4 minutes.
I was driving along in a car to the airport. I was in the back seat. A baby was in beside me, and the baby was in their car seat for the first time, and they did not want to be in their car seat. And the parent said, "Do you want to hear Coco something? Coco Melon." So the parents put on The Wheels in the Bus Go Round and Round for 50 minutes,
5-0.
50.
Mhm.
And I thought, what a perfect time to practice. And Karuna, I didn't get bothered.
Yeah, how come? What'd you do instead?
I said, thank you for this opportunity to practice. And I really want to see where my limits are. And I want to see if I can find happiness in this moment. And I was with friends that I love. I was with a family that I love being with. And I had just gotten to go to Portugal and Italy, which I love traveling. And I just focused on all the great things in the moment. I mean, after 50 minutes, they changed the song to this beautiful mantra.
Hmm.
And I swear to God, I was in heaven by the time that mantra came on. But I wasn't bothered for 50 minutes.
I have a question for you. Okay. So everyone's reality is so different, right? So what if you had to, you're in that situation and you had to drive to LA and you had to drive to LA and the next day you had to drive back, the next day you had to drive to Sacramento, and the next day you have to drive back, and the next day you have to drive to Eugene, Oregon. Next day, no, I'm really serious because this is how people's reality gets, right? Um, what would you have done? How would you have continued?
I was just being grateful. I think grateful helps.
Yeah, you mean
But
hour hour after hour, day after day?
yeah,
But I
focus
don't mean I don't mean to put you down. I just want to push it a little bit because
what my answer seems to come up is to focus my mind on something that is not miserable. Focus it opposite of it.
right. Yeah. 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 Yeah, it takes practice though, doesn't it? Were you always able to do that?
No freaking way.
Mm,
No way. Not last year, not last week.
right. But you do
I'm
get
sorry.
you do you
I
do
don't
get sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
I don't mean to be like, yay, look at me, everybody, like that. But it was astonishing to me
Yeah.
that I endure that happily.
Yeah. No, we can do that. And that it's practice. It's just practice. Some of us have much more inundation of the conditions are bad, you know. And there's a saying that if you meet a beggar by the road, don't teach him Dharma, give him food. So it's always a balance. But we say that at the same time, we have to know that when we're giving food, then you give the Dharma as soon as they eat. You know what I mean? It's not we believe that the food is the answer, it's that the food is what they need at that moment, right? But we don't get hooked on that's the answer. When we last week talked about intention, and we talked about for the moment, for the future life, liberation, enlightenment. So, when you give, I used to watch, we watch our teachers and they give some food to a beggar. I've seen this. They're not, I believe, this is my belief. When Lama Zopa Rinpoche is giving some food to a beggar along the road at Bodh Gaya, where there's hundreds of them, I really don't think Rinpoche is at all thinking of giving that food so the person can eat in this moment. That's it. I think he's doing mantra in it. I think he's seeing it as nectar so that the person can attain enlightenment in the very short time. I know he's doing that with bodhicitta motivation. If we do it like, oh, you're hungry here, that's not bodhicitta motivation. With bodhicitta, you can do you do all those things. But my mind, when I give the food to the beggar, is kind of like, oh, the guy's poor guy's hungry, and I got this, I have this, Pete's card, gift card. I'll give it to him. That's my motivation so that he can eat or she can eat, in the next hour or two. Okay. So the Bodhisattva does not think like that. The Bodhisattva will give the Pete's gift card, but the mindset behind it is completely different. And on that note, is there anything else someone wants to say?
I have a question. It's not tonight, but at some point.
Okay.
Shall I put that for maybe next time? Which is, it's connected to bodhicitta. I've certainly made improvements in my life in being able to be kind to others, individuals. But the impediment for me, and this is kind of contemporary life, is I have some very, very negative feelings about the people who run corporations, banks, militaries, politicians, more global kinds of things, right?
Right.
So don't anything you can maybe communicate about how to, on a day-to-day level,
Sure.
to not let that anger and upset and bitterness overwhelm would be helpful. Yep.
Sure. That we can do next time. Remind me, okay?
Yeah, I will. Unfortunately, I think I'll still have this as an issue next time.
Yeah, maybe. If you figure it out, then tell us how you figured it out next time.
Okay, I'll tell you. Don't you worry.
Okay, so thank you, everybody. So just for a moment, just to sort of seal this time together, so that we're not just dedicating this time to an hour and a half of pleasure or pain, whatever it was you experienced. I'm talking about from me giving you pleasure or pain. So so it can be whatever you want. So the best thing is that all this is, when it ripens in your mind and my mind, our minds continued into full awakening state, a full awakened state, which means not just liberation, but the full awakening of the enlightened mind for the benefit of all living beings. And then even with the reason we want that awakening state, and it can have just awakening doesn't mean fully awakened, just awakening, which means the Bodhi mind, bodhicitta. Even that brings benefit to so many beings because we begin to understand how to be helpful. Okay, we begin to understand that intention of future life, liberation, and enlightenment for others. What we can do things for those three motivations. Okay. And if you have a spiritual teacher, then you can also offer it up to him or her as you're offering to them as like their clothing, silk clothing and ornaments, food, drink, nectar. Not that they need it, but we need to offer it like that. Or if you have a deity practice. Okay, good night.